Hi, in this tutorial I'll be going over how to do web scraping using Node. I was kind of inspired by this article I read, Client-Side Web Scraping with JavaScript using jQuery and regex, and I wanted to continue this to kind of make it even better. So instead of using client-side web scraping, I decided to use Node because so I don't have to deal with the cross-origin issues. When you're using Node, you can basically get information from anywhere and it's not going to give you errors. In this article, what she does is she gets actually information from the freeCodeCamp website and finds the number of challenges completed. So what I thought would be interesting is if we can combine that with web scraping on a different freeCodeCamp website. On the freeCodeCamp forum, there's forums.freecodecamp.org/users, and it's basically like a leaderboard. It's going to rank the users by how many hearts that they received. So I thought it'd be interesting to compare how many hearts that they received compared to how many challenges they've passed on freeCodeCamp, just to see if there's any correlation between number of challenges and how far they've gotten into the freeCodeCamp curriculum with the number of likes that they've received on the freeCodeCamp forum. Now, you don't necessarily have to even be on freeCodeCamp in the curriculum to be on the forum, so there may not be any correlation, but I wanted to use some web scraping to find out. The first thing we're going to do is go into Sublime Text here, and I'm going to just require some dependencies. So we're going to do const rp equals require, and the first thing is going to be called request promise, and this is going to make it easier to make AJAX requests from other websites. So we're going to also have to do npm install request promise. Okay, well that's installing. I'm going to do another line here, const cheerio equals require, it's going to be called cheerio. Cheerio makes it so you can use syntax similar to jQuery from within Node. So that's another thing that'll be easier to navigate the DOM and different things like that when we're doing the web scraping. And let's get that installed. npm install cheerio. And then the last thing is const table. Now this next one is just supposed to make it easier to format our information. For this project, we're not going to create a web browser or anything. It's just going to display the content, the results right in the console. So this CLI-table is going to make it easier to do that. So I'll do npm install CLI-table, and then we'll just let that install. Okay, so we're going to need to set up some variables. One of them is going to be the let users. We're just going to have an empty array of the users here. So let's start our first web scrape here. So first we're going to have to set our options. This is something for the request promise. I'm going to set the options. The first thing is going to be the URL we're going to get the data from. Now we still have to figure that out. So if we go over here to this list, we have to figure out how to get all this information. Now here's one of the problems. A lot of websites render the page with the JavaScript. So like if I go over here into view page source and I search for, let's say, I'll just search for Quincy because that was one of the people on there. You can see it doesn't find that name anywhere. Even though we can see the name Quincy right here, it's not on the source. It's because after the page loads, it renders all this in JavaScript. Now, one problem is when doing AJAX requests or requests to other websites is that it's not going to load all the JavaScript. So we can't just load up this page from Node.js and expect to see all this content because it's not going to load up all the JavaScript. So what we're going to do is try to find if there's an API that's getting all this information. So I'm going to do Command Option J, or I guess I didn't need to do J, but I'm just trying to open up this developer tools here, and I'm going to go to the Network tab. Now I'm going to refresh this one more time, and it's going to, you can see all the different calls that it's making to get the information on the page. It's loading all these different things. So let's go up to the top here, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a list of users. Okay, if I go to this directory items one, you can see this directory items, and then it has a few other things. If I click the down arrow, oh, you can see this. Look, this is the list of users. See the likes received. It starts with 88, 51, 34, and you can see over here 88, 51, 34. And if we scroll over here, well, let me just drop one of these down. You'll see user, and we can actually get the usernames here. So what we're actually going to do is use the request to get this information from the API, and then you can see the username. I'm just going to copy this username really quick. If we go over to freeCodeCamp.org, and then I put the username on the end, you'll see that we'll get the freeCodeCamp profile for that user. The user on the forum doesn't necessarily have to use the same username as the user on the freeCodeCamp.org website, but in many cases they do use the same user. So we can use that username to find the number of challenges passed. So to find out the number of challenges passed, we're going to actually have to count up every item on this list here. But we'll get to that in a second. Right now, we just need to get this link here. So I'm going to, let's see, copy the link address. So now I'll go over here, and for URL, I'll put this in some quotes, and maybe I will zoom out a little bit here. So we can see the whole link here, and then I'm going to put JSON to true. That means the result is going to parse the JSON for us and make it a little easier to deal with the data. So now we're going to do RP and then pass in the options. Remember, RP was this request promise. That's going to do a AJAX request and return a promise. Since it's returning a promise, we can do a .then. So once the promise is resolved, that means once it's able to get the information from that website, then it's going to do something. So let me pop this down to the next line, and then we're going to try to figure out what it's going to do. It's going to give us some information, and I'm going to put all the information in this just a variable called data. And now we're going to make this arrow function here. Okay, let's set up some variables. We have let promises equal let user data equal, so we're also going to make an array of the user data. Now we're going to do for let user of data.directory items, and so it's getting this directory items right from this data here. If you look at this page over here, you can see that the top level of this results is directory items, so we have to get into that. And I'm going to do user data.push. I'm going to push something onto that array, which is going to be the data from the user, basically. So the name is user.user.username, and I figured out what this was going to be, the user.user.username, just because you can see first it has to, if you look in this data here, we get the user.username right there. So also I'm going to set the likes received to user.likes received. And now let's see, I'm going to just add a semicolon. That's all we're going to do for that. We'll end this for loop, and we've pushed all the data onto there. Oh, now that I'm putting this in here, I just realized that I tried a few different things, and I don't actually need this array of promises. When I was figuring out this code, at first I tried something with this, but actually I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to take that out. Now I'm just going to go down here. There was a time where I was going to try to call a promise for each user, but then I decided to go about it a different way. Now, just for the purpose of my log, so you can tell what's happening, I'm going to log something. And instead of doing console.log, I'm going to do process.stdout.write, and then just put loading. One thing this does compared to console.log is it doesn't add a new line at the end, so you can put everything on the same line. So now we're going to call another function here, which I'm going to create in just a second, which is just get challenges completed and push to user array. It's a long function name, but to just describe what's happening. So now the next function we're about to call is going to do that. It's going to get all the challenges completed and then push it to the users array, where the users array is right up here. So what I'm going to do here is add some semicolons, and then I'm going to do a dot catch. So let's see, dot catch. It's just to catch any errors that happen from this AJAX call. And I'm going to just do this little function here. And we're just going to console.log the error if there's an error. Now I'm going to create that function. I'm actually just going to copy this so I don't have to type that again. So I'm going to put function, and I'm going to have the user data passed in still. And let's define that function. This is where it's going to go through each user and make another request for each user on the list. There's a few ways to do this, but I want each request to be in order so that the hearts will be in order like this. So I just want to make sure that the data is in the order that it is on here. So when you make a different request, it's asynchronous, so you don't know which result is going to come back first. So the way I figured that out to do, let me just show you how I'm going to do it to get everything in order. You may be able to find a better way to do this, but this is just one of the first things I came up with. I'm going to do var I equals 0. I'm going to set, this is basically a counter variable, and then I'm going to create a function called next. So we're actually going to keep calling this function. It's going to be use some recursion here. So if I is less than user data dot length, if we haven't gotten to the end of the list, we're going to do this. We're going to set up a new request. So options equals. Now remember, this is just like this one up here where we have a URL and we have, if we want to do anything with the JSON. So I'm going to put URL, and this is going to be, now if we go back over here, we can see that it's just going to be freeCodeCamp.org / and then it's the username. So I'll just copy that and paste that in here, freeCodeCamp.org / and then this is where I'm going to add a plus and user data. We're going to be looping over this. So I is the index that we're looping through .name, and I am going to just change this just to these backticks. That's what the best practice is now. So let's see. Now I'm not actually going to do anything with the JSON. I'm going to do something else. It's going to be transform body. Now this is where we're going to use that cheerio that we brought in. So cheerio dot load body. We're going to be able to navigate this HTML kind of like using something like jQuery. And now we're going to make the actual request. So RP for request promise, pass in the options, and it's going to be .then function. Here's the results. I'm going to put into a variable that's just a $, kind of inspired by jQuery. Just so we know every time something's loaded, I'm going to do process.stdout.write, and then we'll know if a user is being loaded. So now one thing I also want to check for is, well, if we go back over here to this list of users, I'm going to try to find one, trying to see if I can remember. Wait, basically some of these don't have the same username on freeCodeCamp. So if I copy this username here and I put it again at the end of my URL, it says we couldn't find a page for /John-freeCodeCamp. So I want my results to be able to know whether it's actually getting data from the freeCodeCamp user page or not. So the way I figured out to do that was just to check if there's so if I go into here and if I inspect this, you can see it's landing-heading. So I'm going to see if that exists. So I'm going to do const fcc account. This is going to end up being a Boolean equals, and then this is where we can do a look for that tag h1.landing heading, and then I'm going to put dot length equals 0. So if the length is 0, that means it doesn't exist on the page. This will be true if they do have an account, and false if they don't have an account with that username. We're going to do const challenges passed. This is to figure out how many challenges they've passed. And actually, the code for this I got right from the article. I made it pretty similar to how they got the number of challenges on here. So first, I want to see if they have an account. So this is going to be a ternary operator. Do they have an account? Let me scroll down here. So if they do have an account, then we can find out how many challenges they passed. So we're going to look for tbody, tr, and then do dot length. And if not, we're just going to do a string. We're going to set the challenges passed to unknown. We don't know how many challenges they passed. Maybe they have a different username that they use on freeCodeCamp.org. So if we go back over here, and I'm going to go back to this page. So if I, the reason why this works, if I inspect this, you can see we have a tr. Let me go back. So it's tbody, tr. So in the tbody and the tr, so each tr is its own row on here. So basically we're just counting the rows in that, and the number of rows is the number of challenges that the person passed. So when you're doing web scraping, you often have to go into the code and try to figure out exactly what you need to count for it to make sense to get the actual data. We could have just gotten this number right here, but that number is not just, that number includes the challenges passed, and they could also get a higher number based on helping people in the chat room. But I just want the number of challenges passed, so I want to count every line in this row. So it would include, like, if these projects, if I go to inspect this, you'll see this also has tbody tr. So it's going to include the projects that they passed too. So it's going to include everything on here. It doesn't include the headings or anything. So when it counts every single line in this table, that will give you the number here. And so again, when you're web scraping, you just have to look a lot at the code to figure out the best way to do it. So luckily, this is not rendered with JavaScript. It's just we get a page that has all that in there within the HTML, so that's why we're able to do this. We got the results, but we want to push the results to a table. So let's set up the table options up here, because we're going to make a table. This table is just going to appear in the console. So I'm going to put, let's see, next I'm not going to put it there. I'm going to put it right down here. So let table equals new table. And this is just from that CLI table thing that we brought in here. It needs specific options. We have the heading. So what's the heading of the table going to be like? And the first column is going to be username. And then the second column is going to be hard. So if I do control command space, that should bring up this if you're using Mac. So I'm going to put in a heart there. And then challenges. So I just use that emoji because of how many hearts that they've received. And now I also have to make the column width. So I'm going to put COLWIDTHS widths. And I had already experimented with this, and I found that 15, 5, 10 are going to be the good column widths. Now let me go back over here. Table.push. And then I'm going to push on this information, this array. So it's going to be user data, and then I for what index we're on, dot name, then user data I dot likes received and challenges passed. So those are all the information that we're for the different columns, and then I'm going to just increment the I, and then I'm going to put return next. It's going to keep running this function, and if I is less than user data.length, it's going to do all this where it gets the next user's information, and then eventually it will run function.next, and I will not be less than user.length. So we're not going to go through this and return and run the return next. So this is basically our base case. So our base case, we're going to put else print data. So I'm going to call this other function call where it's going to print the data that it's collected. So let me go down here. Oh, so we also have to call this return next to begin with. So down here, after the function next, we have to actually call that. So I'm going to put return next to call that function. So it's going to start that. So now we're actually getting close to the end here. We're going to define our print data function. So I'm going to put function print data. Okay, I'm going to put console.log. We've been printing things to the same with a console.standardout.write, print something to the same line. So we want to get something to the new line. So we're just going to do a console.log, just something to put on to the new line. And I'm just going to use this checkbox here. And then I'm going to do another console.log, and I'm going to print table.toString. So that is going to print out our whole table in the console. Now I'm probably have some kind of errors here. I don't know. I'm going to actually try running this and see if it works. So I'm going to go over to my console, and I'm going to just put node index.js. So let's see, unexpected identifier. Let's see what I did wrong there. Oh, I just need a comma at the end of here. Okay, now let's see what happens. Let's see, throw error, cannot find module request. Okay, well let me just do npm install request. Looks like we just need the module request. Okay, now let's try it again. So it did something. You can see it has the word loading here, but then the program seemed to end right away. So I have to kind of figure out why that is. So somehow it... Oh, okay, I see what the problem is. I forgot to put the parentheses here, so it never called that function correctly to start off going into the function. So now let's try it. Okay, unhandled. It says, oh, cheerio is not defined. So let's see what I spelled cheerio wrong here. So I'll save that. And go into my here again. Okay, it's actually, the dots mean it's actually doing these calls, the requests to the website to get the data. So this does seem to be working. Let's just wait till this finishes. And here's the table. So let me just scroll up here. So you can see it loaded all that. We've got username, the heart, challenges. You can see when it puts in the emoji, it kind of messes up the spacing here. That's okay though. But you can see here's the hearts, and you see 88, 51, 34. So if we go over to here, you can see it's getting that number, 88, 51, 34, and then the way to check that these are right, you can see this one has Quincy as less, so Quincy Larson, if you go over here and put that in there. So the way to check is to go through and count every row. I'm not going to do that. I've done it before to check and it was right. I'm not going to do it in this video, but feel free to do that if you want to check. You can also go and count 291, but that's a lot easier just to count the smaller ones just to make sure it's calculating it correctly. But you can see here to now we can have the number of hearts on the forum with the number of challenges passed on the website, and we can see how they're related. So you can kind of, when you actually look through this, it doesn't seem like there's a major correlation. Like this person has only 4 hearts, but also he's passed 403 challenges. Same with it, a lot of these have passed a lot of challenges, but they don't have very many hearts. And really the person who has the fewest challenges passed is Quincy Larson, but he has one of the number 3 to 4 spot for number of hearts. And you can see some of these, there's actually quite a few unknowns here. I'd be interested to, it just makes me wonder, I wonder, have these people actually used freeCodeCamp.org, or they're just participating on the forum? Most likely they do use freeCodeCamp, the main site, and just have a different username, but maybe not. So this web scraping is a great way to combine information from 2 different sites to get the exact information you're looking for. I'm sure that some of you watching may have even better ideas of how to do this. So if you figure out a better way to do some of these things, put your idea in the comments to this video so everyone else can see that, because I love to learn new ways to do things, and it'd be great to see what other people are doing in regards to web scraping. And that's it. My name is Bo Carnes. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, use your code for good.